I'm going to be recapping chapters 7 and 8 from Flow. Chapter 7 is called Work as Flow, and in this chapter the author was trying to look at different jobs and how they can present themselves as flow activities and when it works and when it doesn't. And the author here found that some communities, they don't really distinguish between work and leisure. The inhabitants of those little communities, and they tend to be smaller, they either work 16 hours a day or not at all. And when asked, like, what would you like to do with your day, it's the things that they do on a constant basis. Csikszentmihalyi, the author, talks about a welder who has an autotelic personality, which is the ability to create flow experiences even in the most barren environments. And he essentially says that that's kind of our task to do as much as possible when it comes to work, is to create opportunities that challenge us, that allow us to set goals and to look for those things, rather than seeing work as something that is like a punishment. And more on that in just a minute when we talk about how people rate their day in terms of where they find flow. The author says on page 159, any job could be changed so as to make it more enjoyable by following the prescriptions of the flow model. And again, that's learning something new, being challenged, getting feedback on that process, constantly changing that and having it being within the skill set of the individual. And he suggests as advice to improve the quality of life through work, we need to redesign work to make it as close to the flow activities as possible, and then to try and, like the welder in the story, develop autotelic personalities where we look to make everything into those flow experiences. He mentions the idea that there's a work paradox. Work leads to more flow than leisure times. When people were recorded their different times during the day, how they were feeling, work leads to a lot of flow. But people would rather be doing leisure time, and in their leisure time, people aren't experiencing flow. Basically, one of the big things that's keeping us from doing that is that we don't pursue goal-oriented challenges on our own, and there's less of a structure for us to do that. We can kind of while away our time doing nothing. There's 3 factors that can hurt work in terms of it being called enjoyable. Sometimes a lack of variety, conflicts with others, and burnout. The best way for Csikszentmihalyi to address that is to shift one's consciousness. For work and leisure time, people must take charge of them and not just accept their fate as this is going to be boring, that they need to do something themselves to kind of will them forward through that. Chapter 8 is called Enjoying Solitude and Other People. According to Csikszentmihalyi, the quality of life depends on 2 things: how we experience work, that's chapter 7, and our relations with other people. He talks about solitude for a big portion of this. Being alone is hard. It's hard to not be absorbed by the chaos. Basically, what flow allows us to do is find order in the world, and we fill in our time a lot with things that we can structure and take control of. When he mentions control, it's to kind of make sense of the world. In solitude, there's just so much room for the chaos to kind of take over, but it can be done. To achieve flow in solitude, but it's hard. The way to this is again a quote from Csikszentmihalyi on page 172. The way to grow while enjoying life is to create a higher form of order. This means taking each new challenge not as something to be repressed or avoided, but as opportunity for learning and for improving skills. Again, we see the same theme throughout all of his this book, where we need to accept challenges and make them our own. Quality of life depends on how well we relate with others. He gives this great focus here on teens. Most parents give up because they fail to engage their teens in a meaningful way, and the teen starts rejecting them, so then they just walk away. But the more fruitful, if more difficult strategy, according to Csikszentmihalyi, is to find a new set of activities that will continue to keep the family involved. That's a quote from page 181. And he also talks just in general about the family. Any time that you're trying to restore relationships, the best way to do that is by adding new challenges to that. And that goes for a kid, for your kids, you're interacting with your kids, or with your spouse. And again, he kind of dips back into talking about teens. What can a strong, vital, intelligent 15-year-old do in your typical suburb? And that was a scary answer to think about what they are allowed to do and why they might waste a lot of their time. He suggests parents need to model involvement in understandable and complex activities at home so that their kids can see that, because what helps is living examples and concrete examples of people experiencing this flow. He also talks about friendships in the wider communities, but nothing that really stood out to me. What I thought of was specifically when he was talking about the teens, we do have a few activities out at school for us that allow kids to have flow activities. We have the Backpacking Bobcats, where they go during the summer to a national park or sometimes several national parks. The solar car team that builds a solar car from scratch. We have robotics both as a class and as a team. Show choir, band, sports, all of these things can do that. But we don't do a great job in the summer of creating those opportunities all the time, and we don't do a great job of doing that throughout the day. And for me, in thinking about our core classes, a lot of them have them in the electives, and I'm still thinking of ways to kind of create that, because if we don't give our kids those opportunities, we don't train them to find meaning, and then we don't train them to go off and do that on their own. And they're left kind of with a more shallow existence. And so I think my challenge is, specifically, I've been tracking this idea of passion projects. How do we incorporate that idea more and more in the middle of their day so that we can train our kids to be the autotelic personalities and find meaning in life?